Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Paul Hutchinson. He was a primary investor and executive producer of one of the most successful independent movies in history. That movie is called The Sound of Freedom. In 2023, it was released, although it had been around for a lot longer. It features Jim Caviezel, who you may remember from The Passion of the Christ. The movie has a lot of controversy around it. A lot of that is simply because it's about rescuing children from human traffickers. It's a big story. There's a lot more in it. And what's more is it was snubbed by Hollywood and the distributions. And I want to just start there for a minute. The movie, wasn't it originally picked up by Fox for distribution? Or Disney, or one of those, or both?
Yeah, so we had filmed it in Colombia, and Fox International came in and partnered with us on the last couple $1 million and putting things together, and was very involved in the filming. And as part of that, they had first rights of refusal on the distribution. In fact, they had full distribution rights, not just first rights. And then we finished the film over 5 years ago, 5 years before it ever even came out. It was completely done. But by that time, Disney had already purchased Fox International, and they were not interested whatsoever in doing distribution and locked it up. And we had a really hard time figuring out how to uncouple that relationship so that we could take it out to the world. And then after that, we ran into roadblock after roadblock. We had another former Disney exec that came in and tied it up for a year. He said, look, I'll put 20 million in, do distribution. And then we were tied into this agreement, and then no money came in at all. And it just flopped. And at first I thought, for that 5 years, I thought, maybe the only people who think this is a good movie is us, the guys that made it and the guys that were there, right? Because everybody was just turning us down. Netflix and Amazon, everybody was just turning us down. And we're thinking, maybe this isn't as good of a movie as we thought. Maybe I just wasted all that money on this film. But their true colors came out when we finally got distribution through Angel Studios, which completely circumvented their system, and they were not happy about that whatsoever. I like to say we took the movie Sound of Freedom, got brought to the people by the people. It wasn't big Hollywood money that funded it. It was all individual guys like myself. It wasn't big media that took it out to the world. It was just grassroots good people as part of Angel Studios network that brought us the TV series, The Chosen, if you've ever seen that. That's how we finally got it out to the world. Right in the very beginning, before we did anything, we took it into Sony and Lionsgate, and Paramount took this story, and it was a fantastic story of not only the rescue there in Colombia, but we took 8 different rescue stories, real rescue stories, and put them all together into that one storyline. The only sad thing is that we only had a handful of characters to put the actions of a whole bunch of operators. So my hat goes off to the hidden heroes that were the ones that really did a lot of those rescues and were very involved in this rescue mission.
As I said, there's quite a lot of controversy around the film. We'll get into that a little bit in a moment. But a lot of that controversy is political controversy, which we can go into. However, that becomes the jumping off point for, well, why didn't Disney want it? Why did it get blocked? What was that? Because it seems like that's a pretty easy place for conspiracy theorists to jump in and say, this stuff is about that, what's going on over here. Did you feel like it was some ulterior motive, or you had your money in? That's why I'm asking you, because you had put money in.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it was an ulterior motive, or was it something else?
No, 100%. It came out full force after we finally started becoming successful. Then those same guys that turned us down because the public really doesn't want this kind of material. And now, of course, the public is just craving for it. You don't hear anything about it. We're the #1 independent film in the country. We beat out Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible the first week. All this crazy, crazy numbers. And nobody was talking about it on Main Street media, none of the news outlets, none of it. Why? Because the message went against their narrative. They don't want us talking about this stuff. They don't, because they're slowly taking us away from family values. They're slowly taking us away from this nucleus family type of an idea. They're slowly taking us away from gender identity. They're made it so that we have to call pedophiles minor attracted people. Are you kidding me? How about you call them sickos? Why do we have to be nice to guys who are causing that kind of pain in the lives of others?
So you felt it was blocked because There is this narrative around breaking up the nuclear family, around the whole gender identity stuff. Some of that, as I said, is seen as very conspiratorial, but you had the real experience of it was being blocked from being released. But you're on Amazon now, or the movie's on Amazon now.
They can't not take us now, right? After we were such a success, they're like, okay, yeah, we'll sign a deal with you and bring you on here, and because they saw the money signs. But you look at guys like Netflix. Netflix turned us down early on, yet they were putting out that TV series called Cuties, really? You know, a bunch of 10-year-olds dressed up like strippers. That's the kind of content that they're okay with, but they're not okay with Sound of Freedom. These are the kind of things that the average person needs to understand so that they can pay attention to the mass psychosis, to this agenda that is breaking apart our families, that is creating division and contention. It's not just breaking apart the families. You look around, we're at a closer state of civil unrest today than we were right before the Civil War in the United States. There's so much division between the rich and the poor and the white and the black and the police and the everything. It's all the right and the left. Are you kidding me? We're just at each other's throats. And I believe that it's by design, that if they can make sure that we're not unified, then we're easier to control.
I'm going to have to call you on it because you use the term they. Who is they?
This is a scary road here, but this is the global elite. These are the guys that are behind the guys who are behind the guys who are behind the guys. So if you think that Jeffrey Epstein was operating independently, you have another thing coming. You have to understand this was an operation. This was an operation to get that kind of dirt on the most powerful people. If you have videos of congressmen, of senators, of judges engaging in those kind of activities with teenagers, if you've got that kind of footage, you control that person and their votes forever. Forever. Cool. Right? But this isn't a new thing. This has been in the CIA book of dirty tricks for a long, long time. You want to control somebody, you get that level of dirt on them, and then you can control their votes. You can control an entire country. So I'll touch on this. We could do an entire podcast on this alone. But as I started becoming ultra successful, as soon as we passed $2 billion under management, and we were the number one investment fund in the country at the time in our asset class, I started getting invited to these very elite conferences with Rockefeller and Rothschild families and these ultra wealthy running the world type of money. And some of the conversations and some of the presentations that were there on everything from overpopulation to levels of control was appalling to me. So yeah, I'm touching on a few things with Jeffrey Epstein, and then the reason why I was recruited to be in that role, undercover, and what I've seen firsthand in some of those meetings.
Yeah, as you said, I think that's an entirely different podcast and one I'm certainly very interested in, as I've been following that stuff since 1983.
Oh, wow.
So that's how long I've been, 30 years studying this stuff. Yes, I'm old, but I've been following this stuff, and people thought I was a complete nutcase when I was talking about it, but I could prove it, and it's more glaring than ever. However, coming out of that level, so the Epstein's and manipulation of power, but there's also these cartels of not just drugs, but cartels of slavery that are very strong, very powerful today. And so let's talk about the reality of it now. So let's go to the real story of you being part of this. You've been invited in. You're this wealthy guy living the life, and you get invited into this dark world. I don't imagine you could have possibly foreseen what it was like to look into the eyes of a child who is in sex slavery while pretending to be part of it. That for me is like, that's a psychological twist, is you're in there to do it. Because in the movie, there's a scene where Jim Caviezel's character, Tim, is pretending to be a pedophile with another pedophile, and he's got that dirty little smirk and all that kind of stuff. And you've got to go in and do kind of the same thing. Talk to us about walking in. You described a scene where you had to wait for the cops to charge the island and you're delaying things. At what point does it become real? Like, what's really going on?
Two different moments were transformational to me. Number one was when Jim Caviezel, his character, Tim, called me and said, "Paul, can you be in Colombia in 2 days?" I need to have somebody who can negotiate a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction with the traffickers. And 2 days later, I'm face to face with the most evil people that I've ever met. I thought that I was going down to meet guys with 3 earrings in their noses and a bunch of tattoos on their faces. And what I saw was very different. My first trafficker I met was a businessman, clean cut, wearing a polo shirt, wealthy family. He was inheriting this island from his family, and he wanted to develop this Jeffrey Epstein type sex island. The next trafficker I met was a gorgeous woman. She was Miss Cartagena, or she ran in their modeling agency and all this stuff. And I thought, this doesn't look like traffickers. But when we're sitting down with them and they're starting to talk about these children, and when one of them leaned forward and he said, Pablo, I have a gift for you. I said, really, what's your gift? And he hands me his phone, and there's a picture of an 11-year-old girl on his phone. He said, this is Princess. She's still a virgin. We just took delivery of some, and she's my gift for your party. And again, in the movie, it was seeing that picture that made me decide to go down. In real life, I was already there. And the emotions that came through me at that moment, seeing an 11-year-old child, that this guy was talking about the most horrible things that you could do to this child. And then the next transformational moment for me was when we were there at the island. In real life, they brought that girl, that little one was shown to me, the one they called Princess. In real life, they brought her to the island. And there was 54 children. They were in a little different part of the house. And because we didn't want them seeing the guns and the money changing hands and things like that. And Edouard, one of the traffickers, he gets up and he said, Pablo, I have to show you the gifts that I brought you. And he went in the house where the children are. This is the moment that changed my life. I could hear some of the kids crying. And he came out and he had 4 virgins, scared to death, 3 little girls, 1 little boy. And this little girl, the same one that he showed me on that picture, the same one they called Princess, he put her in front of me. And I'm sitting down on a chair like I am now. And she was standing up and we were eye level. She was just maybe a little bit taller than I was as I was sitting down. She was standing up and she was shaking. And I looked into her eyes and all I could see was fear. And I made a promise to myself, to God, to children like her everywhere that I was going to dedicate my life to eradicating that evil. And I took her little hands and I just said, "Está bien, it's okay." I told the traffickers, "No, it's not time for the party yet. We still have to discuss some business stuff, send the kids back in the house." The most transformational moment after that was after the agents came and stormed the party and arrested everybody. It was after about a 45-minute delay. We can talk about that separate. But 30 Child Protective Services people came in with the children. And what was crying half an hour before became a sound of laughter and some singing. And I told people for the next few years that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I have heard. That's why we named the movie The Sound of Freedom. And every one of these kids came from either a difficult home or maybe even a healthy home. My business partner, John, called me right before I went. And he said, "Paul," he says, "have you thought through this?" He said, "You're set. You could build your company, keep going on our trajectory the next few years. You could sell out, buy an island, be happy the rest of your life." And I said, "John, would I really be happy if I bought an island, if I bought a jet?" I said, "And tell me this, if we were doing something else dangerous, if I was climbing Everest tomorrow, we would have the same conversation." He goes, "Yeah, we probably would." I said, "When I'm 95 years old and I look back on my life and I say I climbed this mountain and I helped build this multi-billion-dollar company, helped rescue this many children from slavery, which of them at all?"
When you talked about this man showing you that picture of Princess, how did your face not give away the disgust, the horror? Do you know?
Yeah, 2 things happened. First of all, I had a Navy SEAL standing right behind me who was there as my show bodyguard and my real bodyguard. And he's like, "I need to check around the restaurant for a bit, make sure everything is all okay." And later, when we were debriefing, he said, "That little girl in that picture that trafficker showed Paul," he said, "she looked like my daughter at home." He said, "I almost unholstered my weapon and shot him right there. I had to get away from him. I couldn't just sit there." And what happened is I realized if we could get these children out before they were ever abused the first time, that would be a miracle. If she was really a virgin, we needed to get her out immediately, right? And something he said made me realize he had more than her. When he said, "We just took delivery of some," I said, "Fuego, did you say you have more virgins?" He said, "Oh yeah, I got 3 or 4 more." I said, "You're bringing those to the party too, right?" He goes, "Oh no, they're too expensive." Too expensive? I was already paying him $25,000 for this party. I'm paying him $500 per child. for minimum of 50 children just for 2 hours in the afternoon. He goes, Jefe, you already paid $25,000. You want to F more virgins? It's going to cost you maybe $2,000, maybe $5,000 for that little one. It's going to cost you maybe $10,000 more. And at this point, I was mad, like literally pissed. He was talking about these children like they're commodities. I've got a $50,000 watch on. I've got $2,000 cufflinks. I've got a custom shirt. And I put my hands on my chest and I'm like, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? He said, oh, no, Jefe, no. I said, I want every one of those virgins at my party. I said, they damn well better be virgins when they get there. They're not for you. They're for me and my guys. You understand? He goes, oh, yeah, Jefe, I understand. Stupid. Now, fast forward over the next number of years, 70 plus undercover rescue missions, really trying to understand hell this was coming from. People ask me, they say, Paul, how can you go face to face with so many guys selling you an 8-year-old child and not have them see the hatred and the anger in your eyes? And my answer is this. This surprises people and it's going to make some people mad. It's because I don't hate them. Don't get me wrong. I put my life in danger to ensure they never hurt innocents again. I'm not a pedophile sympathizer. But what I wish more than anything is that we could go back 5 or 10 years before they ever cross that line, before they ever hurt a child, before they ever pass that trauma on, and sat down with them at that point and said, what is going on in your life? What is it that you need to let go of? Because here's what happens. Anybody who's dealt with that kind of trauma as children, it comes out in either low self-esteem or anger issues or anxiety or depression, or in some cases, they pass that trauma on in physical abuse, verbal abuse, and in some cases, the sexual abuse of a child. And so whatever it is, whether it's cankering your own life or whether it's cankering others, by figuring out how to get the love and the help and the healing that you need is the only way we're going to fix this problem. Because for 10 years, I was fighting fire with fire. And we can go down some dark rabbit holes about some of these trafficking missions that I was on and how dangerous some of them were. And I lost operators. One of them got stabbed 20 plus times. One of them, I was at his funeral when I met my wife. These are some dangerous stuff, fighting fire with fire, but realizing over time that if we could encourage people to get the help that they need, that may come in the form of therapy and counseling. That may be in the form of just being willing to talk about it with your spouse. For me, my biggest transformations that I saw for myself and some of my operators, and most of my operators were abused as children. And what happens with most men, 2/3 of men who are abused as children grow up to be protectors, right? They're going to use that pain to ensure that that trauma never is passed on. And a lot of my operators were guys like that, and they were just stalwart warriors. And one of them called me about 7.5, 8 years ago. We had been doing undercover for about 2 years. And he said, Paul, do you trust me? I said, yeah, I trust you with my life when we're doing our missions. He said, you need to come with me to this fully immersive, transformational healing experience. I'm like, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul F. Hutchinson. He goes, yeah, that's what you need to heal, bro. Is that Paul F. Hutchinson? I wasn't doing anything illegal or immoral, but I guess immoral on what scale? You have 200 half-dressed girls at your parties with all the basketball players. That's not the example I really want to be setting for my kids. And so I went to this guided meditation, plant medicine, a healing experience, and it transformed everything for me in changing how I saw myself and how I saw other people. I came to an understanding that everybody is dealing with some level of trauma. Most people are dealing with some pretty serious things from our childhood, and very few of us ever talk about it. The average age of somebody talking about their abuse as a child, the average age is 52 years old. That's my age. And I've got kids, I've got grandkids, I've built my career. And if we're holding on to that trauma until late in our adult life, how is it showing up in different areas of our life? So my best 2 most powerful pieces of advice for people in this whole process: number 1, go home and hug your kids and build that relationship with them. And number 2, look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do to become a man of integrity in every area of my life? What things do I need to do to release those things that do not serve me? Release those things of my past that never did serve me, that never did define me, but I allowed it to. So that's the most important thing, is encouraging us to heal ourselves and then passing on that healing to others. And doing so, we will save millions and millions of children.
And that's what we said at the beginning of the show, is that it's transferred trauma, but you can't heal a trauma unless you look at it. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle from quantum physics says when we observe something, the thing we observe is changed, and so are we. And that's why therapy is so powerful, is because just by speaking it out, it's transformed. Maybe not completely, but it is transformed to some degree. And there's a willingness to confront something. And I certainly agree with you. Everybody doing whatever they're doing is doing it because they're in some kind of pain that they oftentimes don't even realize. As I said earlier, it's compartmentalized. That being said, there was characters in the movie, and you brought one of them up. In the movie, her name is Katy, I think it was. She is the beauty queen or whatever it is. And she's the major recruiter in the initial scenes in the movie. We kind of lost her in the movie. We didn't know what happened after the arrests on the island. Do you know what happened to her?
Yeah, they were all arrested. This is one of the reasons why I've spent a lot of time after the movie and working to change policy in different countries. Unfortunately, some of those early rescue missions, they were released and then rearrested and then released again and now rearrested. We had all the evidence with them being on camera, undercover cameras, talking about their business plan, talking about where they got these children, talking about the most horrible possible things that I don't even want to mention on air that they are doing to these children. That was all caught on tape. Unfortunately, a lot of these countries have laws that require the children to testify against their perpetrators, and it's re-traumatizing these kids. And a lot of them don't want to say anything for fear of retribution to their families. It gets very, very challenging. In fact, I remember some of the early rescue missions in Mexico. We were required to bring some of the little 9, 10, 11-year-old children over to the table to see the money changing hands in exchange for conversation about it, for sex with these children. They had to be there witnessing the conversation. We're like, are you kidding me? It's all being recorded. Why is the system in place re-traumatizing these children in this way? That's one of the big things that we've been doing, is changing the laws in these countries so that we can protect the children instead of re-traumatizing them to keep these guys in prison. In most cases, these guys get life in prison. We tell the federal agents when we come in, we say, listen, we'll do the work, we'll pay for everything, we'll give you all the credit. Your people are going to think you're heroes because we're going to be arrested and you're going to send us to the U.S., right? They won't even know that we're involved. All we ask is that the bad guys stay in jail for good. They don't get around your system. And number two, we have full access to the kids and getting them rehabilitated and back to their families. And number three, if you want to plead these guys from life in prison down to 25 years, we're okay with that as long as they're giving us information on the U.S. pedophiles that have been down there visiting them. So it's a win for the kids and getting them out. It's a win for us and finding American predators as well.
So let's go to something you just talked about there, which is the re-traumatizing. I believe there is a mental health issue in the United States that is much bigger than people talk about. And a lot of it is due to trauma, and we sort of touched on that in the earlier part of the episode. But the challenge is, you watch the movie and you see this little boy and little girl reunited with their dad. The little girl goes back to drumming, and it all seems that was good, very traumatic situation, but now they're back and everything's fine. For someone like me, with my psychology background and certainly my work with PTSD and severe trauma, I know that's not how it works, that kid is now screwed up for a very long time, particularly if they don't get any help. So what happens after you get these kids out? Is there anything that is actually taking place? Because I know that would be a major concern for people who have any understanding of it's great you got them out, but oftentimes, and I would put this back to the possibility of the character Katy, is I'm guessing that that's a traumatized child grown up. That's a kid who was probably sexualized, normalized that sexual behavior, and was able to do that without conscience with other children because she'd been through it.
Yep.
Talk to us about, okay, the kids are out. Now what happens for them to become functioning members of a family or of a society?
Yeah, that's the real rescue right there.
Right.
Getting them out of the clutches of a trafficker, that's an easy part. Takes a couple Navy SEALs and some guys like me to go in and con them out of their kids, put them in prison. The hard part, the real rescue, starts immediately afterwards. In not just getting the kids out of hell, now getting the hell out of the kids. This is some difficult things that they've dealt with. Some of the most successful programs we've had is in making sure that they have a healthy family. We have a sister foundation here in Latin America that has helped over 30,000 victims get back on their feet and live normal lives. And their system is beautiful. They have a piece of property a few hours away from the nearest big city, about 3,000 acres on their property. They have donors come down and donate the money and the time to build libraries and hospital and a whole bunch of homes. And they'll find a family, maybe a father, a mother, and one or two children where they're broke. They're literally going to be out on the street and they're going to be begging for food. And they'll say, listen, you're in a hard situation because you don't have a job. We will give you a job. We will give you a home, and we will give you 3 more children. Now, these children are going to be checked on every day. They don't have healthy families that we can send them back to. We don't want to put them in a foster program. We want to put them in a healthy home. We have therapy on site. We have doctors on site. We have everything right here necessary for all of these people, but we want to make sure that they have a healthy family environment as well. And that's been phenomenally successful. In Southeast Asia, more than half the children that we rescued in Asia were sold by their own families. And in a situation like that, you don't want them to put them back in where their families are reselling these children. So you've got to find healthy homes for them. We have some foundations that we have helped that pay for the adoptions of these kids, which can be really expensive if you're bringing them in from another country into the U.S. That whole process is $20,000 to $40,000 to bring a child in, and that doesn't even include all the therapy. And so the Child Liberation Foundation, my foundation that I started about 8 years ago, that in the beginning was just paying for operations, undercover work, it still is paying for the operations of some of our sister foundations, some Navy SEALs and whatnot. I'm not doing undercover anymore because I'm public. But the majority of the focus of the Child Liberation Foundation, majority of the focus is all on healing. It is expanding the healing capacity of the safe houses that all of our kids have been to. In fact, the executive director of the Child Liberation Foundation is Ada Vanessa. She's my wife. We met in Haiti. She was there doing aftercare with one of the orphanages that was taking care of the kids. So we met there 7 years ago, and now that's all she does full time is build out the different activities and healing tools of the safe houses for the kids.
So there's a couple of things here that I want to bring to people's awareness. And first of all, because you mentioned it, sometimes these children are sold into sex slavery by their own parents or their own families. Now, you might go, that's horrendous. Of course it's horrendous. However, when these families are starving, sometimes they will trade a child as income. And then on the other side of it, so there's the very local economics within a family. There's the bigger economics within the cartels that are reselling these children over and over and over again. As you said in other interviews, you can sell a bag of cocaine once, you can sell a child multiple times a day. There's that economics as well. And there's the facilitation. So the facilitation, as I said, in a dysfunctional or damaged family or an economically stressed family, it can happen from the family directly. But it also happens under trauma. As you say, in Haiti, there's a tragedy, something happens, kids go, quote, missing because they're taken away because these traffickers see this as a great opportunity for them business-wise. It's great that famous stars like Sean Penn go in and help with these things, but these things are also going on and we're not aware of it. And on top of that, and I want to say this very clearly, kids are going missing in the United States. You'd think that they're just going on the missing kids list and they end up on a milk carton, or used to end up on milk cartons. There are a lot of kids you don't get to hear about. So there's 3 pieces in there. I know I just sort of dropped a bomb on you, Paul. I apologize.
Well, I want to start at the beginning and go backwards. First of all, in terms of the kids in the United States, and I'll touch on this might make some people mad, but the border issue should have never been a political issue. This is not about the right and the left, and it's not about the votes. This is a human trafficking issue, and it's a big one, specifically child trafficking. The last numbers I heard back last summer was over 85 undocumented children. It's well over 100,000. There was over 85,000 then. Now it's well over 100,000 undocumented children that have come across the U.S. border that had a little unvetted phone number or an address of who their sponsor was supposed to be. Now, with that many children that is coming across, there's no way to effectively vet all of those, quote, sponsors. And so they're using U.S. taxpayer dollars to put these children on airplanes. I know because here in Latin America, there is children being taken every single day, missing all the time. And these kids are being taken, they're being missing here. They're taken up to the border by a trafficker who has a connection with a trafficker on the other side. They give that trafficker's information to the child as their new sponsor, and U.S. taxpayer dollars are transporting these children to places all around the country that are now being exploited. It's a horrific situation. On top of that, there's a lot of other things going on there in terms of the number of other people that are coming in, military-age males, and there's a lot of things from our enemies. That's a whole other subject by itself. Just sticking with the child trafficking issue, this is a big, big problem, and we need to get our heads around it in a big way. And it's happening in our own backyards. It's important that we recognize that a lot of trafficking is happening in a, quote, good Christian family where they have a good father that's serving in the ministry or whatever else. And unfortunately, they're using those as covers for some of their despicable acts.
And then there's the tragedies, the earthquakes.
Yeah. So in fact, touching on the earthquake thing in Haiti, this is an important one. There was a documentary called Operation Toussaint that highlighted one of the rescues. I led most of that rescue. You don't see me in the documentary because I was still undercover. The only time you see me is when I'm laughing with the traffickers. If you didn't know who I was, you'd hate me because we're talking about some horrible things with the traffickers. And I was still undercover at the time. Well, there's a little girl at the end of that video. She's sitting on a rocking chair holding a teddy bear. Her face is blurred. She was 14 when we rescued her. She was taken when she was 7. Her parents were killed in the earthquake in Haiti, and nobody even knew she was alive. And these unfortunate situations where traffickers will come into these catastrophic, whether it's a war in Ukraine or war in the Middle East or these big earthquakes or whatever, traffickers will take advantage of this confusion everywhere and exploit these children. This trafficker sticks his key in this door. It's this steel door in this dark area of town, and I see multiple cell doors down the left-hand side of this alleyway. And this female trafficker named Cho stuck a key in one of these cell doors and opened it, and there was this steel. It wasn't even a bed. It was a steel plank held to the wall with a chains because it was a small 5-foot by 6-foot room. And there was this dirty, dingy blanket on it. And to the left of that steel plank was a concrete block. And this little girl was sitting there on this block. She was taken when she was 7. And she looked up at me with this blank look in her eyes like this is the same thing that happens every day. And what makes me so mad, Dov, is every single man who walked into that room over the last 7 years was there to rape. We were the first 2 to walk through that door that didn't have that intention. And she didn't speak for 2 weeks after we rescued her. And her first words she said were, "I didn't think anybody would come."
Wow. Paul, this is a profoundly important conversation that people need to know more about. There is the movie Sound of Freedom. It's an important movie, and I've recommended it to many people. And I say I'm recommending it to you for a couple of reasons. One, it's not graphic, which I really appreciated, particularly from my own background, because that would re-traumatize me, even though I've dealt with a lot of that work, both personally and with other people. It's not graphic, but it's very real of the things that go on in the world, and it's an important conversation to have. So I think it's important that people watch the movie. I think it's important that people understand what's going on. There is one last piece I want to say before I bring it back to you, and that's this, that a lot of this backlash is because of the politicizing of this, the QAnon stuff, and a lot of bandwagoning around that, that's separate from the fact that this is happening. Can you just address that QAnon question? Because it's got to be glaring.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the sad thing is that there's a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions, and Jim Caviezel is an amazing actor. One of my favorite actors. I loved him in Count of Monte Cristo as the Count and Person of Interest. He's just an amazing actor. But he's very outspoken with his political beliefs. Will speak at these QAnon rallies and talk about how certain people on certain sides of the political spectrum are doing these horrible things. Here's the reality. Our teams have arrested just as many Republicans as they have Democrats. There's no certain group. In fact, the reality is a lot of these ultra successful business owners, a lot of them were leading to the right when they're going down and paying for these things and these big egos. And for us to try to politicize this in any way is doing an injustice to the children, because this isn't about politics to them. This is about freedom. This is about happiness in their life. This is about being free of being a slave or being abused by an adult in any way. We should set our differences aside and as good men and women step forward and say, hey, this isn't about the Christians versus the Muslims. This isn't about the right versus the left. This isn't about the rich versus the poor. This is about the children. And together we can come together. Together we can eradicate child trafficking.
When you and I first met, it was the first part of the conversation we had, which is where I said, who gives a shit what side you vote for? Can you vote for children? Can you vote for the care of children? As we record this, 49 mass shootings in 45 days of the first part of the year. And by the way, the last one killed was a small child. We need to make some changes. I'm not saying we're going to take the guns away from Americans. I'm smart enough to realize that's never going to happen, but we could do a lot better. I'm not saying we can eradicate child sex slavery, but we can do a hell of a lot better. And so with that, I would like for you to tell people where they can find out more about you, about your organization and how people can reach out, etc. But I want you to leave us with one piece of practical guidance that will allow us to raise our awareness or do something that will make a difference.
Absolutely. One of my operations in Cancun, Mexico, one of our traffickers that was offering to bring children as young as 7 years old was gathering a bunch of his contacts by going through social media and finding out the kids that were posting with the tag of Cancun at the time and whatever, and he was going through those and finding ones that didn't look like they were there with their parents or somebody older and whatnot. And he brought in a bunch of victims that way. Realized that we don't want to be living in fear. I think that fear is the tool of the enemy. We can live in faith. We can believe that we're going to have a healthy family and our children are going to be safe. At the same time, we need to be aware of the fact that there are people out there that are predators online that are trying to find out where your kids are, where they're being dropped off, what their schedule is, when they're going to be traveling, et cetera. And so there's no problem with your kids having healthy social media with their own friends. But everything they do doesn't need to be publicized to the entire world. So that would be a super important thing to keep your kids safe. But the most important thing you can do is realize that 92% of children who are sexually traumatized, it happened from a familial person, from a family member, from a neighbor. Don't be letting your kids go over to slumber house parties with families that you haven't fully vetted. And be aware of the emotional changes of your kids. It might not just be hormonal. It might be that your daughter now is at that age where somebody is taking a notice and abusing. So being super compassionate with your kids to the point where they are very comfortable talking to you about these problems is something that will go a long way in making sure that your child is not a victim.
Thank you. That's important and vitally important information. Thank you. Again, Paul, it's been a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy down in South America right now, and I'm certainly looking forward to spending time together in May of 24. But before that, people want to find out more about you and where they can find out more about your resources and your entire movement. Please tell people they can do that.
You can find me, just type in Liberating Humanity. You can go to liberatinghumanity.com. All the social media is liberating.humanity. My Twitter, my X is Paul Hutchinson. It's just me, but I think you can still type in Liberating Humanity and find me there. Our foundation is the Child Liberation Foundation, and you can go to liberatechildren.org. So Liberate Children. So there's not an ING there. It's just Liberate Children or Liberating Humanity. And you can get lots of resources to help keep your kids safe and help you as an adult heal.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Again, we really appreciate you taking the time. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember that those who control the meaning for the tribe control the movement of that tribe. And we really have to reassess our meaning when it comes to taking care of our kids. Leaders committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that we've got to tap into what drives human beings And oftentimes that means that we've got to take a deeper dive into the emotional source code of the individual, of the organization, and even of a nation. I'm Dov Baron, and I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe. Because unified actualized meaning is a single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and for companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever you tune into the show from and rate, review, and subscribe to the show. It makes a huge difference, and we're really grateful when you do it. By the way, if you are a regular listener, thank you so much for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about our children and about how the things that you think are not part of the world that you live in because you live in the first world of Australia or Canada or the United States or some other first world country, it's happening right under your nose. As Paul said, this is not about moving you into a place of fear. It's moving you into a place of awareness so that you can take care of your kids. Paul pointed out something that is vitally important to you. And that is, if you want to protect your kids, love them. Let them know that they are loved. Let them know that they are safe to talk to you about anything and everything. Because when you do that, that creates psychological safety for them to tell you about something that doesn't feel right. It's not about you turning into some vigilante. It's about you loving and caring for your kids and letting them know. Because if you went through trauma as a kid, and who the hell didn't, as John Bradshaw said, 93% of children grow up inside dysfunctional families, and the other 7% are liars. We've all been through something. And if you don't deal with that thing, even though you think it isn't affecting you, it is. And if it is affecting you and you've not paid attention, how is that, or how might that be putting your own children in danger? Not necessarily of you, but of you not making them aware because you shut down around something. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, and in your leadership impact. And I am out.